I'm giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time. The name of this trash can is ideology.
Если звезды зажигают, значит, кому-нибудь трудно. Значит, он хочет, чтобы они были. Значит, он называет эти плевочки жемчужиной и нагревает метеля полуденной пыли, срывается к Богу, боится, что попал, плачет и целует мучительную руку и просит, чтобы обязательно была звезда для несшихся. Что ты теперь темную муку, а после ночи тревоги, чтоб спокойный наружно и говорит кому-то, если ничего, страшно, да? Послушай, серьезно, да, если кому-нибудь трудно, значит, это необходимо, чтобы каждый вечер на крыше загоралась хоть одна звезда.
La letteratura esaltò fino ad oggi l'immobilità pensosa, l'estasi, il sonno. Noi vogliamo esaltare il movimento aggressivo, l'insonnia febbrile, il passo di corsa, il salto mortale, lo schiaffo e il pugno. Noi affermiamo che la magnificenza del mondo sia arricchita di una bellezza nuova, la bellezza della velocità. Non v'è bellezza se non nella lotta. Nessuna opera che non abbia un carattere aggressivo può essere un capolavoro. Noi siamo sul promontorio estremo dei secoli. Perché dovremmo guardarci alle spalle se dobbiamo sfondare le porte misteriose dell'impossibile? Il tempo e lo spazio morirono ieri. Noi viviamo già nell'assoluto, perché abbiamo già creato l'eterna velocità onnipresente. Noi vogliamo distruggere i musei, le biblioteche, le accademie di ogni specie e combattere contro il moralismo, il femminismo e contro ogni viltà opportunistica o utilitaria. Noi canteremo le grandi folle agitate dal lavoro, canteremo il vibrante fervore notturno degli arsenali e dei cantieri incendiati da violente luci elettriche, i ponti simili ad innasti giganti che scavalcano i fiumi, balenanti con un luccichio di coltelli. È dall'Italia che noi lanciamo per il mondo questo nostro manifesto di violenza travolgente e incendiaria, col quale fondiamo oggi il futurismo. Perché vogliamo liberare questo paese dalla sua fetida cancrena di professori, di archeologi, di ciceroni, di antiquari. I più anziani tra noi hanno 30 anni. Ci rimane dunque almeno un decennio per compiere l'opera nostra. Quando avremo 40 anni, altri uomini più giovani e più validi di noi ci gettino pure nel cestino, come manoscritti inutili. Noi lo desideriamo.
We will be talking about the dialectics of war.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry for the long wait, Prometeo. It's going to be different. It's going to be any topic, by the way. So, Prometeo, did you see on Twitter that post where I responded to, that meme by Inhumans of Capitalism posted by Ness? You know, the one where it's like, agrarian societies have no profit in motive?
I saw that one. Yeah, I didn't get too deep into that one though. It was on my timeline for about. Really, it went on and then off my timeline.
I think it's still in my timeline, that all that bullshit combo.
I still have all the misogyny thing on my timeline still.
Oh yeah, the feminist one was just goofy. The feminist one was goofy. Because
yeah,
they were claiming that misogyny predates the birth of class society, although both of them are basically around the same time, which is the birth of agrarian society. I mean, when it comes to agrarian society, I do actually agree with Graeber's interpretation, because Graeber's interpretation is Bertrand Ricardo, that the birth of class society started around the birth of currency, which was enslaved society through debt, through grain acquisitions.
Yo, it's still in my timeline. Oh my god, I'm so fucking tired of all this bullshit.
Yeah, but
I'll wait for the next round of Twitter discourse to come around. Then I'll.
I really hate.
Have you actually read Ricardo's Grain as Currency?
Have I read what?
David Ricardo's chapter called. I forgot what work was an example.
I haven't
called
read it. I haven't
Brain.
read Ricardo. No.
You should. Pretty fundamental. Because the difference between like Marx and classical economy is barely anything. Like all Marx does is just twist classical economy against capital. You know, showing the contradictions of capital through the logic of classical economy. Well, classical political economy. More accurate.
Who would have guessed the bioessentialist was transphobic?
Whatever. Like, work found in kitchen. Okay, so Prometeo died.
Damn.
He came. Okay, so when he lasted, his last words were Twitter Discord. Famous last words, by the way. Famous last
Discord does this thing.
I'll just
This
wait.
was-
But yeah, when it comes to the birth of the plant society, it started because of agriculture. This is the birth of agrarianism, which later transitioned to slave societies. But the claim that misogyny predated all of that is just ridiculous. Like misogyny existed in a social sense, as like a form of social behavior.
I mean, yeah, it existed
in the same way racism did. But
yeah,
in,
it
but
didn't
it doesn't mean
exist
that,
on a structural level. It didn't exist as a structural form of oppression
exactly
until
on the social level. Like, the thing is,
class
all
came
of the,
around.
exactly. Like, the thing is, all the social, problems we have are subjective and change depending on, what the bourgeoisie deems as, it's a simulacrum. To put it simply, using Baudrillard's terms, it uses things that don't exactly make logical sense. That are, God, I might be butchering this because I know this is not the accurate description of what Baudrillard meant by more than real. But essentially,
Yeah.
Max Morvan, what it actually. It's more than real, not because that it's fake, but because it just appears to, be more than real. Like, okay, the idea that misogyny existed forever is more than real. It's more true than true. Because
Because it feels
from a
true to
feminist-
most people.
Exactly.
It's more
Although
than-
when it comes to actual history, it's not the case. Because even in agrarian slave societies, women were given power. It's like draws, like I forgot what I'm gonna use the term landlord, fucking anachronistically. I have no clue what the actual term is. Someone who's like in charge of a agrarian society. Because I know there were like some female. Of course, that later changed in the slave society because by the mid, of agrarian and the beginnings of slave society, the view towards women changed. And you have like the birth of proper systemic misogyny around that time. But the argument that misogyny existed forever makes ridiculous scenarios like, okay, so there's actually a very funny skit I found on a server.
It doesn't even make sense since racism and misogyny as how we define them in the modern world couldn't exist without an organized society. And organized society only came about when exploitation came around. So it doesn't
which
make
was
any
the birth of
sense to
agrarianism.
blame it was first.
But also the birth of currency in the form of grain.
The only way this is possible if you claim all men are inherently misogynistic, and since all men are inherently misogynistic, misogyny as a structural problem has always existed, which again is bioessentialism.
Oh yeah, there's the skit. I'm gonna read it because it's basically what I'm picturing happening in these retards' heads. Grug ate white. Grug see seed from berry. White peak. Grug plant berry seed. Haha. Grug stole white jump. It is funny. Like, that is what they think, you know? That is what they're thinking, you know? But, you know, men decided to start throwing plants into the ground because they hate boys. You know? Right, Dargo?
Yeah. Yeah, I hate Twitter discourse.
Yeah, it's
In
just
fact,
so
why am I
definitionally,
even looking at Twitter discourse? I should be looking into, I don't know, porn, memes. Why am I getting heated with this
literature,
misogyny,
philosophy,
ancient and
history,
shit?
W goons.
W girls, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like, arguing that, you know, to read this, you know, retarded statement, knowing that all root of all evil is misogyny, not classism or the class system, posts like the most, you know, white boy thing possible, you know? The way misogyny predates everything, the founding father of inequality and exploitation. By that logic, I could argue that the existence of emotions is the beginner of, you know, all exploitation, you know? But that would also not make sense, you know? Emotion is the beginning of all exploitation. Because that's the kind of logic we're going with, you know?
To be fair, I don't think there's an exact start of exploitation, unless we
Exactly.
count, I don't know, the first organized society to ever exist.
Which technically would be primitive communism. But how is that exploitation then? I mean, I guess the only exploitation there is killing other tribes. And that's it. Like, claiming that, you know, exploitation can just be simplified to, like, primordial evils just doesn't make any sense. Even if you're looking at this from, like, an esoteric Gnostic perspective, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the root of all evil is fundamental to reality itself.
The root of all evil is the existence of good itself, when we started separating what's right and what's wrong. And
Exactly, morality. Oh, sorry, social morality. As people will argue on days about it. It's objective, it's objective. For me, it's like a spoon, you know? Using the Stirner terminology.
I mean, morality is based on belief, on religion, while ethics is based on the general
Logic.
consensus of most, yeah, on logic and most of what people believe. That's the main difference. Mm, but I think that, or how do I say this? Our interpretation of ethics is shaped by morality. Like, we cannot get rid of morality fully until enough time has passed between the ideals of past societies, such as feudalism, has actually withered away. Since, from my point of view, feudalism is still exists in some shape or form.
Yes.
The
I
same
mean,
way.
feudalism just found a way to, you know, all feudalism did is just assimilate with capital. Like,
Yeah,
capital's goals, you know, if you read Adam Smith, if you read, you know, all the classical economists, a lot of their points are oddly social democratic. Like, the conception of regulation and, you know, state involvement started with the birth of political economy, which is also the birth of capital as an ideology.
yeah. The main problem I see with people interpreting Marx and most Marxists is that or at least that's the problem I used to have, is that they think feudalism was birthed by slavism. Capitalism was birthed by feudalism. When in reality, it's more or less like evolution. Like it doesn't happen overnight. Like I used to think.
Yeah, like
Slavery
when it comes,
didn't stop existing when the Roman Empire fell, but we count as the fall of the Roman Empire as the birth of feudalism. In reality, these systems evolve and transform, and even the most ancient form of mm, com, com, primitivist communism and slaverism can perfectly still exist today in some isolated societies.
pretty much. I mean, a lot of these. See, the mistake people do is when they look at class stages, is they think of it in a vacuum. Oh, first it's feudalism, then it's capitalism, then it's DOTP or communism or social democracy, depending on what tendency you follow. In reality,
Yeah,
it's really more of a gradient. Everything survives and assimilates into immanent critique. Using Hegelian terminology, into the world spirit. The Weltgeist.
yeah,
Like everything exists within everything, and we're reaching to such a point where the everything is everything, and within everything there is nothing. Thus, we have reached postmodernity, especially now. Like capital has killed itself, but also rebirthed itself.
out, yeah. That I think what you're referring to right now is how for these societies turn into post for these societies where work doesn't only exist inside of the workspace but also in your own home and in what's
Exactly.
left of third spaces. Uh, we don't only grind, if you want to call it that, inside a cubicle or inside a factory anymore. We do it every at every moment
Pretty
we're
much.
awake, even when we're asleep. In For
This is
example,
true.
when you invest in, in any business, you expect to get a return from it. You're actually actively trying to gain capital even without interacting with any process directly. You're still technically working,
Pretty
even
much.
if you aren't
I
doing
mean,
anything. It doesn't even make sense. Work doesn't even make sense anymore.
because the thing is, work has killed itself by going beyond the need of basic labor, by trying to turn itself into something that is not, by turning itself into a kind of religion of slave morality, to call it. You worship work because you want to be productive, not because that work leads to something. Because for the sake
Yeah,
of working, Protestant work ethic, all that basically. I mean, not just the Protestant work ethic, but like even people who like critique the Protestant work ethic are no better when they like think, oh, we do need to work to build socialism, right? We need like let productivism, for the 5-year plans, bro. Like that is still bourgeois. Like
of
fundamentally,
course,
the bourgeoisie
of,
themselves are temporary embarrassed proletarians who believe themselves not to be as exploited as the proletarian. It's the bourgeois delusion. They believe that they benefit from capital, even though capital is also alienating them. It's just they like that alienation. They find it fetishistic. You know,
yeah. This reminds me of something I saw in a dream once. Doesn't matter.
yeah,
The point is that even if what the delusion these people used to live by uh used to exist like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, these solutions don't work anymore since the benefits you would gain as if you contributed let's say a socialist or communist society would be way better than the benefits you gain by being a capitalist in a capitalist society. They actively work against their own benefits since they don't even know what's actually beneficial to them. And I maybe sound like a hippie right now, but I think it would be better for the bourgeoisie to stop being a bourgeoisie, not because of other people, but because of their own situation. You get
I
me?
mean, the thing is, I understand the sentiments, but I don't think the bourgeoisie are gonna, voluntarily give up being
No,
bourgeois, even though they are well aware how much it, messes them up psychologically, because they have like a fetishistic, almost Molochian kind of obsession with their own, appropriation of surplus value. I mean, going to the Thai, the Thai talks about imminent experience.
yeah, this reminds me
Bourgeoisie
of
is getting imminent experience from wage appropriation, from labor appropriation.
this reminds me a lot of the Saturn cult thing 4chan had going on a couple of years ago and recently it reached Instagram and TikTok. Uh,
Yeah,
Basically that every member of the bourgeoisie and the elites and whatever is in power really actually adores a single deity that's essentially Saturn from Greek mythology, but it's also not really him. It's a weird thing, and they tend to talk about a lot about the symbolism and stuff and whatnot. But I'm more interested in the core idea of what this Saturn worship is, and what I come to understand that Saturn worship is basically the worship of power and as in the form of capital.
yeah,
Uh, mm, there's a lot of things that we tend to ignore in our day-to-day life that we tend to actively reject. But I think some of these, while there's some components that have to be rejected, like for example that all of the bourgeois members are inside a secret society and whatnot. I don't really believe that, but I think the Saturn worship theory appeals to the psychology of the ruling class.
yeah.
While
I
it
mean,
does
in
not align to
general,
their actual beliefs, it aligns with the way they process the capital.
yeah, because the thing is, I don't think the bourgeoisie who are in secret society, such as the
Yeah,
what's it called
I
again,
doubt
Cross and
there's.
Bones, Freemasons, all that
Yeah,
Illuminati and all
I
that
doubt they're actually
yakkery.
sacrificing children to Moloch or whoever they're
No, they're
praying
just
to.
doing that
But
because it's for their
yeah,
own,
yeah, they're not
self-reflection.
sacrificing people to anybody. They're sacrificing people to the idea of capital. They're not even
Yeah,
sacrificing them for
capital is its
themselves.
own kind of god. I mean, going fucking land.
Yeah, this is
Land
one of the
describes
few things that
capital as
I.
a
This is one of the few things that I agree with Nigland, and that is that capitalism itself is a god or a demon or an artificial intelligence. I actually believe capitalism is alive as an organism.
it
Just, I
is.
don't think it's a time traveling god demon that built himself by traveling into the past and whatnot. It's something that we build ourselves, and it's actually
Yeah,
controlling us.
it's our own kind of it's man's own kind of god. Lunacharsky, he believed in God building. What if mankind already built God, but that God is the demiurge, kind of the
Yeah,
demiurge
we
of
build our own
capitalism,
demiurge.
the creator God, because capital is a creative force. Even if you hate capital, you still have to acknowledge that capital is progressive. It advances technology, improves living standards, it builds industrial / urban areas, but it at the same time does the opposite in return. For every car, light bulb, internet, there's a billion dildos and lavubus and whole
I wish
other
I had a dildo.
commodities. Yeah, I'm gonna cut that out. But yeah, when it comes to like capital as a religion, commodity production, I would say, is and commodity fetishism is Eucharist. You know, it's Eucharist, the Eucharist of the simulacra that binds the soul of the worshipper of capital with the church. I mean, there's a lot of truth. Okay, controversial. A lot of truth to some of the anti-Semitic-ish claims that capital is related to Judaism, because there's a lot of like Talmudic and Malachian elements to capital. I mean, child sacrifice when it comes to Moloch.
Yeah,
You sacrifice children to
child
Moloch
workers.
in exchange for Moloch to protect you. We're doing the same thing by sacrificing children in the education system.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but not just the education system. Um, I've heard recently that for example, that some of the U.S. states are rolling back on their anti-child work laws, and many teenagers are working food at
Of course,
food
they call it work
chains and
experience, but
stuff.
we know what it is.
Yeah, they're trying to push it even further recently and make them work not just in food chains, for example, but working on factories again. And they're also rolling back the age to do this, and they're selling it as a way for them to access capital more access capital earlier in their life and whatnot. But what they're actually doing is exploiting them at an even earlier age, and I,
Yep.
I don't think this is going to end well. Well, now that we live in a post 40 society, now that I think about it, is that most of these people are actively working without getting paid and without realizing it. I think we're about to. We're just
Yeah, because
a
they
couple
have
weeks,
this, notion
we're
that
a couple
if
years
they
away
serve
from. We're
if
a
they
couple
serve
years away
capital,
from.
capital will reward them with a basic standard of living. But even that is like, well, the thing is, it is going away. But the conclusion is okay. I don't like this sect of capitalism, but I like this sect because this sect promises me free health care. It promises me to own the workplace. It promises me lower taxes. I'm gonna go to the sect of Stalin Lassalle. The Church of Lassalle. You know, which is
I
also a
was
sect of capital.
Yeah, I was actually talking about something else, and I think we're about to witness the birth of a post for the society. Uh, in a regular post for this economy, industrial economy, people work inside and outside of the workplace. But what mm, what the market is has been turning into lately is that we're about to start working without realizing that we're working. For example, do you remember Pokemon
Yeah,
Go? Uh,
yeah.
Pokemon Go, the Pokemon company recently sold what most people, what I don't know how to describe this.
I mean, Pokemon
Yeah,
Go is the greatest description of this.
they sold the routes. Most people were taken to AI companies for them to create their own maps and whatnot. And I think we're about to start getting exploited without knowing that we're getting exploited. They're going to
Pretty
extract
much,
all surplus value without us knowing that we generate this value in the first place.
pretty much.
Same thing happens with AI model training, that we're actively working on AI without realizing it too. For example, character AI,
Yeah,
we interact with.
we're constructing the golden calf.
Yeah, that they're trying to make it look that they're working for us, but in reality, we're teaching AI how to behave like us. We're teaching
Yeah,
LLMs how to act human.
which
We're
is not likely because again, there's
even by uploading a single video to social media is contributing to this machine of machines of capital. It's a machine of machines of capital. So, for the lack of a better term.
I mean, the symptoms of this, capital basically going outside of itself started all the way in the birth, modern consumerism and, the spectacle. It's just continued ever since towards that direction.
Capital is expanding even further. It has not only expanded to.
Well, it's actually overcame itself. Like, capital is no longer just about capitalism. It is the manifestation of all human class societies into one. Even the ones that claimed to be revolutionary.
It has integrated the characteristics from slave societies. It has integrated characteristics from feudalist society. People can buy titles, feudalist titles. People can buy slaves in Nigeria.
I would say capital has also even implemented elements of socialism.
China, for example.
In a perverse way. Not even in China, just I'm saying in general. Like, there's
Amazon, for example, Amazon mode of production is essentially the same of a socialist society, minus the worker ownership of the means of.
Well, of course, socialism in the context of Marxism-Leninism.
Yeah, it has taken everything except the means of production. It's the one thing it actively denies. There's actually no way.
I mean, even cooperatives deny this because one of the biggest,
for example,
supermarket brands in Anglo-land is a cooperative.
Yeah, and also the CNI, the biggest workers syndicate in Spain that for a while was led the anarchist commune of Barcelona, eventually became a social democratic apparatus of the PSOE, the Spanish Socialist Party. Well, Social Democratic Party, actually. In fact, I don't think they're even a social democracy anymore.
Well, I mean, the idea of social democracy died in its cradle because the goal of social democracy was socialism. It just realized that the socialism part is impossible, but the veneer, the lie, the spirit of socialism,
even the lie is dead at this point. Even the lie is dead at this point, except for the US. At first, social democracy died in its cradle, as you said, but then it got replaced what one would call post-social democracy. That would be social democracy without the social part. Social democracy that tries to appeal to capitalism while actively benefiting the workers. But now it's not even that. Now it's lying about its own lie. It's a lie matryoshka. It's a lie behind the lie. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not actively benefiting. It doesn't even have a welfare state anymore. It's just promised to give you a social welfare at the future.
The thing is, the welfare state itself was even a form of slavery. Like, everything about capital, when you tell a Marxist-Leninist or like any other normie of opposition to the bourgeoisie, that hey, capital is this living, spiritual, demonic force that is not able to just be defeated by just pure economic logicism or even just cultural reform. Like, you actively need to reject it. You actively need to fight capital. And it doesn't matter what ideology you believe in, because fundamentally, ideology is capital's kind of, in a way, ceremony. Now, I'll explain what I mean. So, going back to, let me choose
ideology. Ideology is considered an
ideology, according to Zizek, from the book Sublime Object of Ideology, and also from the film Pervert's Guide to Ideology, is like glasses. But the glasses themselves are not a distortion of reality. They're an interpretation of reality. Because the liberal interpretation of ideology is that ideology doesn't exist. It's pure opinion. But the thing is, this opinion exists in reality. In reality, I mean, I'll take something random like the National Socialist position. Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense. But if you look at the critiques that the National Socialists are doing, which is that there's this capital is controlled by the Jews, Israel is the enemy of the white man. There is truth in that. Not to mention the fact that they acknowledge, Hitler was a social democrat. It is true. The National Socialists aren't wrong. They're just worshiping a demon. They're worshiping the wrong thing. They're delusioned and territorialized to such a degree that they're completely controlled by ideology. Because ideology is a process of territorialization, using terms from Deleuze and Guattari. It's territorialization that territorializes everything, no matter what. Because capital learned during the 30s. See, the argument that capitalism is fascism is capitalism decay is wrong. It's incorrect. It's not accurate. But the argument that capital in crisis will utilize anything to save itself from an existential crisis, even if it means utilizing ideologies and positions that are against it, is true. I mean, we see this happen in, for example, the 15th Premier of Louis Bonaparte. Louis Bonaparte was a self-proclaimed socialist, despite, crushing the Paris Commune. But of course, that's just, French history. But Louis Napoleon, despite, being a so-called, socialist, he came to power to strengthen the bourgeoisie and to rejuvenate into the bourgeoisie. And the thing is, this ended up benefiting the labor movement in a weird kind of accelerationist sense. It also ended up worsening the labor movement because communization was realized in the Paris Commune. I don't agree with Marxist-Leninists that the Paris Commune was a failure. It was a success, but the success was perverted from within itself.
Yeah,
From
they
factions
also the fact that
such as
also the fact that they couldn't seize any of the means of productions or the banks. It wasn't
not to
feasible.
mention class collaborationism was implemented into the Paris Commune. The petty
Also because
bourgeoisie were left alone. They were not communized. And the forces of communization that existed in the Paris Commune were the anarchists and the Blanquists. Yeah, Louis Blanqui once again W's, as usual. But yeah, the Paris Commune.
Continue.
But the Paris Commune, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong criticizing the Paris Commune, but negating its success is just completely ridiculous because the Paris Commune succeeded what the conspiracy of the equals does not. The conspiracy of the equals attempted a proto-Paris Commune. I mean, not even before the Paris Commune, had something called the Munster Commune. During the German Peasants' War, Florian Geyer, Thomas Munster, all the funny Rosicrucian proto-communist figures, they actually established agrarian peasants' communes that were led by the bourgeoisie, but the logic of these communes were post-bourgeois. Like, communism existing at a time where capital doesn't exist kind of contradicts, the classical historical materialist interpretation that capital must exist for there to be communism, whatever label you want to use.
Now, what you said before about that ideology is the what of capitalism is a ceremony of capitalism. I actually think that we could also interpret it the other way around. That ideology is only considered an ideology if it is viewed both as an adversary to capitalism and as a tool for it. For example, have been many ideologies and philosophies across history that have opposed capitalism, but have not resulted as a functioning
the
tool
greatest
for it,
example
and
of
have
this
been
is the
forgotten
fascist
by
movement.
time. There's a lot of
the greatest example are the fascists and the Jacobins. The fascists
No,
used power. The
mean,
fascists
the
promised to get rid of capital, but they
fascist
didn't.
it still exists today, but as an
Yeah,
as an apparatus external of the official limits of the state, even if it's financed by the state. The US government still funds far right and fascist parties all across the world, but they don't actually want them in power. They just want them to keep the socialists out of power. What I'm
and
actually
in
talking about
return,
is
you
what
know,
what I'm talking
okay,
about
sorry.
is philosophies like cosmism or situationism who have never been useful to capitalism and its framework in over a
Yep.
century or actually ever. So they've actively been rejected. There has never been a member of the bourgeoisie trying to found a cosmist party in, for example, Russia, or futurism trying to revitalize from anonymous donations. Capitalism as an artificial intelligence only feeds what it knows that both attacks itself and benefits itself. It's a ceremony. You
Because
have
you,
to be
yeah,
baptized from a sinner, or in this case an enemy of capital, into an apparatus of the state.
now I would kind of like to elaborate on fascism because I do sort of disagree. I don't think fascism exists anymore. I think fascism, as what it was supposed to be and what it is, doesn't exist, and instead has become a very like perverse form of nationalistic ideology, nationalist ideology that serves the bourgeoisie indirectly, even though the fascists, the third positionists, believe they don't. And oftentimes, the third positionists who are very much, genuine about their socialism, about their syndicalism, about their futurism, about their opposition to capital fully, oftentimes get, put aside or get co-opted or become social democratic. Like capital is an assimilating demonic force, and I'm gonna say this: Machiavelli is comparable to the one of the apostles. Machiavelli.
Yeah, the guy who wrote the Prince and the Republic
Yeah, I love
and
his
all
work
that stuff.
because
Yeah, I
Machiavelli.
I haven't read him, but I've studied a bit of him, and so far, it seems like it seems right. But
Because
also that reminds
Machiavelli
me that
was kind of
there
a
was also
proto.
this Chinese guy who basically said the same thing as him, but he was regarded as an evil philosopher. I should look into that. But yeah,
Oh yeah, I look at
he
Chinese guy.
seems reasonable.
I mean, I like Machiavelli because Machiavelli pretty much is just a proto-Marxist. Like he
Yeah.
analyzes the material conditions of the Republic of Florence, not as in to advise the advise the monarchy, but to dialectically deconstruct it and make just a general, way how this functions, systematize it. And the thing is, Machiavelli's systematization worked, but it also kind of exposed, the metaphysical process of the demonic force known as capital. I guess we might as well call it Moloch at this point, you know?
I mean,
Moloch.
rather than metaphysics, I think this could be classified as pataphysics, the science of
Oh,
imaginary things. Well,
yeah.
metaphysics say that things already happened before and all that. Pataphysics is just making shit up and it happens anyways. It's a literary resource
Hypostician.
from this one
Hypostician.
French demagogue called Alfred Jarry. I think capitalism has more in common with pataphysics since it creates realities rather
Exactly.
than taking an transcendental reality that existed
I
way
guess the
before us.
reason why I use metaphysics as a term is because I use it because it's where hypostician comes from. I mean, I could
Yeah,
just say
it's a bit
hypostician because it is a
idealistic. It's a bit an idealistic concept since it says it existed before all of us, and it heavily implies it existed before matter and all that. And I think the better
And there's
term
no shame
is
with idealism,
pataphysics. Pataphysics is just making shit up.
pretty much, and that shit, it hypostationalizes, over time into something. Like you said, you were disagreeing with Nick Plant when it came to the cybernetic god that time travels and
Yeah, yeah, I
tells
don't.
Saul
It doesn't make
to write a
sense
book.
for something to be
Well,
in the future and travel back in time.
I actually think it does make sense, but it's not literally a time traveling god. It is capital learning and evolving from input and output matrix.
I mean,
From
it's not just capital. It's not just capital that Nicolan talks about. It's that capital existed before capital. Capital has always been waiting for us, according to him.
yeah,
And I do not agree with any of this, really. I think a better alternative was always possible and was always achieved. We just didn't took it.
well, the thing
I
is,
don't.
capital existed, but it was birthed when man birthed class society. Like it's a demiurge god. It's not a. It's a demiurge created by man. That man is now enslaved by. Because
Yeah,
the
that's
real
what.
god, the
That's
real
what.
god is a
Yeah, that's what
god is a
Niglan meant with teleplexity when you create a tool and then you end up working for that tool. You create a
yeah,
system to facilitate life itself, but then that system itself becomes complicated. For example, computers. Computers were made for make communication easier between us, but it suddenly turned into its own world and it became overly complicated.
pretty much. I mean, going back on this, so back to the subject of ideology and how it works again. Another good way to understand ideology is the concept of myth from Sorel, which is very underrated. Because
Yeah,
Sorel,
yeah.
because Sorel's revolutionary myth is misunderstood as a utopian socialist concept, referring to a
Of course,
utopian spirit within the proletariat manifesting as a narrative of revolutionary myth. We'll see.
it's
No,
definitely not utopian or idealistic. It's something symbolic. It's something that
yeah, it's
appeals
symbolic.
to the ideas of humanity, but does not put ideas over the material conditions. It tries to be the preferable byproduct, if you want to call it that, of capitalism. The one thing that will end capitalism, spawning from it. It's as Sorel puts it, it's post-Marxist. It's post-Marxist
Yeah,
truthfully.
yeah, I agree completely. Like I was just gonna mention that, Darwin, because I was just mentioning, the misinterpretation that is given. The misinterpretation that unfortunately creates someone I like, but I know that their interpretation of Sorrel isn't spot on.
Yeah, but it was directly inspired by his ideals of violence and revolution without a central party administering all that shit. It's revolution as a process, not revolution as an act. If you know what I'm trying to say. It's when God, or in this case capital, dies, it gets substituted by the wheels of time, the wheels of decay, the slow collapse of the system. I believe capitalism is going to die by its own contradictions, but not the contradictions caused by class itself, but the contradictions between the ideologies it has absorbed onto itself. It's going to take so much from these ideas that people don't know what is real and what is not. Capitalism won't be able to make any of this into profit. It's the own techniques that make capitalism the system for excellence. It's going to be the cause of its slow decay. At least that's how I see it. Hello. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'm back. I just had to do something. So I was gonna say something, but I was interrupted by neighbors of mine. So I'm gonna edit this just after before you said that. So Sora. In actuality, Sorel is not an idealist. Sorel simply just understands that every ideology has a narrative, a myth that creates itself. The myth that leads towards action. Revolutionary myth, and I think that is a post-Marxian concept that is very negated because it did influence a lot of post-modern Marxists and post-Marxists like Althusser, I think. Yeah, Althusser,
Yeah,
Deleuze,
and it kind of also affected some of
Bataille.
already Marxist groups on itself. For example, the Soviet
Yep.
Union and Mao's China with propaganda and such.
Communization
Propaganda on,
theory,
propaganda on
even.
itself, propaganda on itself is just an interpretation of this myth. By creating propaganda reflecting your own ideology, you're creating the myth of your ideology winning over the other ideology. You're creating a myth between two gods battling and one devouring the other.
Yep. And going back to Sorel, I do completely agree with what you said before. When it comes to Sorel, I generally agree though. When it comes to capital will die from I guess over information. It would be too much information,
The
contradictory, breaks the
contradictions,
system. The system hallucinates, and the system just starts contradicting
yeah.
so much that it dies out, like an organism from cancer.
Or for
We are
example,
the
an
revolutionary
LLM.
disease that must spread. You know?
For this is the same as LLMs or AIs collapsing because of how much information it is fed, how it regulates information. It's
Yep.
Yeah, since capitalism is an AI on itself, it's bound to collapse for the same reasons, not because of the contradictions it causes on class, but the contradictions it causes on class ideology.
Controversial. I also say socialism slash communization is a artificial intelligence, but it's an AI born from by coding within capital. Capital from producing itself produces its own destruction through the birth of the cancer known as communization, which this cancer must spread everywhere through myth, through violence, through acceleration, through
Yeah, it's
siege.
just doing capitalism on it inside of capitalism. You're doing the same framework that capitalism has been
I mean,
working with every other ideology, but putting it against itself. Capitalism
we're
takes everything that goes against itself as a weapon, and what if communization must do the same? I
yeah.
don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are completely making sense. Like that's what exactly I'm saying.
It's just
Communization is a
it's
force that cannot
contradicting
be
the
contained.
contradictions. The solution is
Yes,
contradicting the contradictions caused by capital.
Alpenbang, or in Marxism, Engels' terms, Alpenbang. Assimilate the contradictions and accelerate past these contradictions. And the problem with that is, others will say, okay, it's not realistic. Like, what do you suggest here? Do you suggest like seed style,
I mean, the death of
un-
capitalism isn't realistic anymore, so the solution must be unrealistic.
exactly. Because we have
I mean,
entered a point where the differences between idealism and physicalism slash pre scientists as in scientism, atheist materialism. The kind of
I still
unite
believe
the
in
two
materialism.
together in a Hegelian kind of immanent critique, which this Hegelian immanent critique will lead towards the synthesis of everything and the actualization of the world spirit, which is interpreted as communization, as a cancer taking over the body and
And
becoming the new organism.
this is this is just still orthodox Marxism, since it doesn't
Yeah,
actively reject the material. It's you're still saying that material and ideas act with the work
yeah,
with the working class. It's just Marxism, not
pretty
post Marxism.
much.
It's not ideal. You're not turning into idealism itself. You're just Marxist. Because
Well, I use the term
ideals are
post-Marxist because
still
that's mainly
ideals are still an important part inside of Marxist rhetoric. Even
yeah.
Marx said that even without the ideal of a revolution, that without the
Now,
ideal of a revolution, the
coming
revolution
back
won't be
to
achieved.
what I'm talking about, actualizing the material and idealist forces. I think actual idealism is not that ideal. Context of gentilis philosophy of
Yeah, I don't
actualizing.
really like him. I don't really like him. I do not agree that it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know.
No, I think it does make sense. I think gentile is the kind of closest thing we have to a pre-postmodernist. Second to a Stirner, Nietzsche, the time, even Baudrillard at times. Oh yeah, referring back to something else, related to the myth and the beast of communization. The antichrist of communization. When it comes to its hermetic characteristics, its goal is cosmic. Its goal is to actualize a new culture from 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 birthing a new spirit to create it. In deeper terms, a protocol. A culture centered around something completely new that is neither racial or necessarily national. I mean, it could still be national. It's just the nation itself evolves into being a civilization, being an imperium. Because imperium, I hate to sound like a tramp fag at times, but Rome was nearly the solution to mankind. It just
The
crashed
what?
onto itself and became a disease.
The what?
Rome.
I didn't hear you. That I didn't hear the last thing. What was the solution to mankind?
Well, initially it was within Rome, I would say. Rome
Yeah, but
was nearly a unifying imperium that created, the path towards, something greater. But the problem is class contradictions within slave society restricted Rome and turned Rome into nothing, into the disease, into the Malachian beast known as Capital.
I mean,
Birthing it.
even if Rome united all of humanity and then it evolved into the next step of
Well,
class
not just
society,
Rome, but I'm using Rome as a main example.
yeah, even
Of
if Rome or China or whoever took that role, even if they did that, I think that we would have reached similar conclusions as we live today. Maybe we would have gone through the same processes as we've gone before. Uh,
I mean, I would agree, but I'm talking mainly from like an idealistic perspective. The idea of an imperium is covers to both autarky, democracy, and oligarchy. And the goal of an imperium, I would say, is very anarchic. In a sense, in a communizing sense. Because an
that
imperium, go into Francis Patriarchy, refers to a
I don't
civilization,
care
a
about that.
state that goes beyond, nationalism, beyond the nation, beyond internationalism. A
Yeah,
synthesis of both.
hyper-nationalism or romantic nationalism. That would classify as partly romantic nationalism. It just did the same thing as the Prussians did when unifying Germany. It just wanted to do it on a bigger scale. Even its own economic
Well, it's
policies that
more than
seem
that
like
because it's creating the basis for human acceleration towards, the stars, towards the cosmos.
I
That's why
mean,
I am
technically
sympathetic
Prussia
to.
did the same. Technically Prussia did the same
I
by
know,
accelerating industrial processes when
I
unifying
know,
the whole the
I know.
all of the Germans. They both
I'm.
did the same thing, or at least Parky tried to do the same thing as the Germans did, even regardless if it was conscious the Germans did it first or not.
I kind of see what you mean, but I guess I have to kind of be a bit more clear. I'm not talking about simple just greater national unification. I'm talking about the unification of a civilization, of something fundamental that existed since primitive communism. Because my problem with cosmopolitanism is the fact that even in primitive societies, there are still genetic and cultural differences between groups, but not, in the context of petty nationalism, that it's like the Polish group or the German group. So it's more so that it's like a general Slavic group, a general European, Asiatic. You get what I mean? Unifying those spheres, unifying those, citadels, those kingdoms, those imperiums. Those imperiums themselves will function on a basis that it requires, the excellence of aristocratic culture without the toxicity of its perversion. Aristocracy as an anarchist, in an anarchist sense, in the context of Proudhon, is the goal here. That's why I'm sympathetic to technocracy, because the technocratic goal, the goal of having intellectuals, philosophers, and an aristocratic cultural aristocracy using the Nietzschean views, an Übermensch, leading through virtue of merits, knowledge, IQ, and skill, is fundamentally anti-bourgeois, because those are idealist conceptions. In a sense, those are conceptions that the bourgeoisie only utilizes to produce capital, but those perceptions move towards passion, excess, limited experience. What I'm saying is the goal is to create an empire of passion, an empire of passion, an empire of laziness, an empire of ego, an empire of pleasure, an empire of fraud. You get what I mean?
Yeah, an empire of
Also
feeling,
mentioning
an empire of something else beyond actively trying to gain profit from exploiting lower class
exactly.
people.
Also referring
Well,
to the time solar economy
capital.
as well.
Well, if you think about it, you can still gain profit by exploiting people inside these societies, just not capitalist process. You just transcendenting capitalist logic beyond capitalism and using it, for example, with pleasure,
I mean, yeah,
with violence,
because
with
the law.
whatever.
Yeah, because
It's a,
I'm going, more towards a Matthias. You recognize it comes from, solar economy, from solar ends, from
yeah, yeah. I recognize when you reference Bataille, especially when you use stuff like erotic language and stuff,
yeah, because
pleasure and all
when
that
it
thing,
comes to
violence and all that. Uh,
because
but
when it
what
comes to
you're trying to say
Bataille,
is that I feel those
sorry,
empires, while not actually being capitalism itself, since there is no capital, they still reframe everything. They could still reframe things on capitalist logic. You would be rebirthing capital outside of capital. Mm, pleasure would become a coin. Violence would become a coin. If you create an empire centered around pleasure, or if you create an empire centered on
well, not
pain.
just pleasure necessarily, just pleasure in the sense of just
Yeah, I'm saying
masturbating,
the
using
one
drugs.
of the examples I
But,
remember from you saying.
oh, yeah, but I'm just like clarifying. When I mean pleasure, I mean in the Nietzschean / Stirnerite egoist sense.
Yeah, I'm
Anti-worth
not.
in the sense of productivity from within, productivity from your own will. It kind of libertarian, but you get what I mean. Because I'm not
Yeah,
exactly an egalitarian.
I mean it's libertarian in both a left libertarian and a right libertarian sense. They
Yeah,
both appeal to voluntary work, yes, within
I am
different
very
economic
sympathetic
frameworks.
to that position because voluntarism can exist. It's just to do it, you need to create
Classless
a
society.
law, a class of society that is based on a hierarchy based on something fundamentally human that
You're still
predates
creating a
capitalism.
hierarchy, which if you create a
Well, I'm
hierarchy, you're
not an
still
anarchist.
creating
That's the
class.
thing. I'm a communizer, not an anarchist.
I mean, of course, you're not an anarchist, but I don't see how it makes any sense. I mean, the actual difference between anarchists and communists, as far as I understand it, and this is my personal interpretation, maybe it's not the actual meaning of both, is that anarchism is just keeping the socialist and communist stages of human economy into the next stage. It's just the main difference is that anarchism is just skipping stages into what is actually, quote unquote, the natural conclusion of human production models. A highly democratic, decentralized society without a single
Well, I
unified
wouldn't call
leader.
it democratic.
Uh,
I
well,
wouldn't
it
necessarily call
depends
it
on the
democratic.
form of on the form of anarchism, but
Yeah,
the
because I
earliest
subscribe
forms of
more to
anarchism
Proudhon.
are heavily pro-democratic. That one, I remember this quote. I don't remember who it was from, but it basically went like, anarchism is just democracy taken very seriously.
Well, I would say that quotation is not exactly accurate when it comes to Proudhon, but that's just, anarcho-semantics.
Yeah, it's just one guy. It's just one guy. But what I'm talking about
Well,
is the general
not
consensus.
just Proudhon, but also Stirner. Now,
Yeah.
Dargo, I think you kind of maybe misunderstand something. When I'm referring to, culture aristocracy, I'm talking on the concept of, Plato's philosopher kings, because I see
Yeah.
communism as like a system of philosopher kings, and there is a natural hierarchy, but this hierarchy is
No,
changing
but
all the time in an organic sense.
yeah, that has to do with Heraclitus and stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't like Plato either. I don't like Plato either.
Okay, I guess we sort of. I mean, guess this is our disagreement. I'm more leaning towards aristocratic communization, and you're just a simple platonic,
Decentralized communization rather.
rather than organic centralized colonization in my case, because Bordega, well, not just Bordega, but also others too. I mean, I guess
Right.
on my end, I think I'm a lot more open to revolutionary nationalism as a tool for building a basis. But
Yeah,
that
me
nationalism
too.
fails itself and becomes communization. I mean, the best
Yeah,
example of nationalism that became communization are fascism initially and National Bolshevism in the German Revolution. Because,
I was thinking of
well,
national Bolshevism, but in Russia, because it's not really nationalist if you wait and think about it. Well, maybe it's nationalist in the romantic nationalist sense. Just a couple of nations unified under a single idea of an even greater nation. You know?
yeah, I mean, I would say, what the National Bolsheviks did in the German Revolution is fundamentally futurist. Because the National Bolsheviks in Germany, I mean, especially Altenberg, Peitel, and the Council Communists, who were National Bolsheviks, they didn't, simply just appropriate Freikorps nationalism. They took Freikorps nationalism's, the militant aspect that leads towards insurrection. For example, I don't remember when this was, but during the German reunification wars, I remember that a lot of Prussian proto Freikorps, which were also called Freikorps, actually revolted against the early Kaiser. It was a
Yeah,
revolt
but
that existed, but it happened like
yeah,
that's just like one example of what it kind of is referring to. It's referring to a Freikorps as like an anarchist, communizing force that seizes
I
all
mean,
for the idea of Germany as in a German as in communism. And of
I
course, it
think
later
what you're
becomes pan-European.
I think I'm getting what you're trying to say, but I don't really agree with it either. Like Frankfurt
I mean, it's fine.
as a nationalist group that deteriorizes through its actions the ideals of both nationalism and aristocracy and whatnot. But I think they would have
And
pushed
becomes
even
futurist
further to the
by
right,
rejecting
the state,
tradition.
if they had a coup or something.
Let's see. Now, one controversial thing, I guess, I am also somewhat still sympathetic just to, I guess, aspects of one tendency. I also forgot to mention. So, Juche, right? Okay, please don't kill
Yeah.
me.
No,
So,
I'm sympathetic towards Juche too.
the anarchist origins of Juche, Chinchikol, right?
They had an anarchist organ? I didn't know about that.
Origin.
Oh, Origin. Yeah, I heard of that. Kim Il Sung. I think it was Kim Il Sung or his
No,
father
it was
was part of.
Chinchikol. There was a guy
Ah,
called Chinchiko. He lived during, the first anti-Japanese uprising
Wait,
in Korea.
I think
And
that guy appears in Red Flood, right?
Yeah, he does. He does. So Chinchiko was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
egoist anarchist who was inspired by Verdun, Kropotkin, and he basically wanted to create a Pan-Asian kind of anarchism, a anarchist civilization of self-reliance that would start in Korea and go across Asia. Because the original goal of Juche was Pan-Asian. It wasn't just Korean nationalism. It was Pan-Asian because Chinchiko also took inspiration from Sun Yat-sen's Free People's Principles, but apply them to the logical conclusion, which is, okay, so you want sovereignty. So sovereignty secures, the imperium, secure the imperium, or the civilizational state, I guess, or the
Mm,
post-national state, well, not a state as in a state, but the
So
post-nation.
what I'm trying to what I'm understanding is that he was basically jockey if he was an anarchist.
No, there's more to this. And the other
Okay.
one is, of course, welfare of the people. Welfare of the people is self-reliance. The people to rely on themselves and their own, resourceful nature from their own voluntary action, very mutualist.
Okay.
And the other one from the Sun Yat-sen was democracy, but in Sun Yat-sen's case, it's anarchism. Of course, that later got perverted by Kim Il-sung into a Marxist-Leninist framework. Similar to how fascism, from its anarchistic, communizer, Humanian origins, became, social democratic.
Mm.
That's why I like to call sometimes Juche the only working third positionist ideology, because it is a third positionist ideology. Just it's killed itself a while ago. Like the party in the DPRK does not practice Juche anymore.
I
'Cause
mean,
Juche,
yeah, it makes sense since Houston nowadays rejects unification with the South, and on its fundamental or ideological origin, one of its main objectives, apart from abolishing capitalism, was unifying the Korean people. But now, recently
before that
on
was
its new
Pan-Asian.
constitution,
It was starting before that was starting with unifying the Korean people and then moving towards Pan-Asianism.
yeah, now it's actively rejecting unity with the South since they see it as an unsolvable stage of capitalist degeneracy. I don't blame them though.
Which is yeah. Another thing I guess you kind of don't know about. Have you heard of Charles Fourier? The
I've
French
heard the name
utopian
before, but
socialist. French utopian socialist Charles Fourier.
no. Oh wait, I think
So
I've heard
Charles
of it.
so Charles Fourier kind of had similar views to me in a way. He was a utopian socialist who supported basically creating, a new kind of Jacobin civilization. I need to reread him again. But what I really like is basically his emphasis on, creating a creative society, an avant-garde society way before Hume existed. That is a kind of technocracy. That's another inspiration of mine is Charles Fourier. I will have to reread him, but I recommend CCK's Philosophy's videos on him and his, of course, the works that you could find as PDFs. From Charles Fourier. But from Charles Fourier, again, we both agree on one thing. We fundamentally respect the futurists and their sacrifice, sacrificing themselves to live on, The youthful spirit of the future that accelerates us to the end.
Yeah, I hope we get there soon.
The spirit of the youth, the spirit of violence, the spirit of adventure, the spirit of acceleration, technology, is what fuels us, is what birth. Because accelerationism proper, like accelerationism always existed as a strategy, but proper was born from the Italian future, from Marinetti's manifesto, from the futurist artistic societies, from the various factions across the world, including in Poland, France, America, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and Mayakovsky. The futurists are fundamentally what we want. We are future. We are seeking to destroy everything the bourgeoisie held safe, and to establish a new order. That is
I
another
mean,
thing.
imagine trying to establish a new economic system without establishing a new order. It's impossible. It's obviously.
Yeah. I mean, again, the label futurist seems kind of redundant because if you're referring futurism only to, the movement in the 20s, again, you're not exactly a futurist. When you're referring futurism as like a living philosophy that lives to this day, then you are fundamentally a futurist, which is why I'm here. I also like ego-futurism as well. I think it's also a good basis. I think it's a good compromise. Well, not a good compromise, a synthesis between,
I mean,
egoism and futurism.
yeah, but who started it? What? Who sta- who stated that ideology? Who was part of it?
Basically, ego-futurism started with Russian neurotics. Basically,
Other
it
Russians. Okay, that's
started in Russia, basically where they combined like aspects of Dostoevsky, Stirner, and Nietzsche into futurism, mixing it with utopian socialist ideals. They
yeah,
later influenced Bogdanov, by the way. They
yeah,
later influenced Bogdanov's kind of futurism because the ego
yeah.
futurists, unlike the Italian futurists, weren't actually opposed to nature. They actually believed nature can be a rejuvenating force as well.
Yeah, I just don't know much about Russian futurists, if anything at all
You
about them.
should.
So I was
Should
confused.
I can send you some reading lists on the Russian futurists. I really love the Russian futurists a lot, especially the
Sure.
ego futurists. I consider myself an ego futurist in a sense, but
Yeah,
I'm an ego futurist with some Italian leaning elements in there, especially when it comes to nature
also,
versus technology.
yeah. Also, according to one of my friends, Novatore used to be the anarchist used to be a futurist, so he could be considered one. I mean, he's an illegalist, which is at some point similar or basically the same as egoism. So I don't
Okay,
know
but
if it
yeah, I do need
classifies
to
as an ego futurist.
kind of re-clarify some of my positions again. Maybe reread some of the text I had before. But yeah, when it comes to fuck, I forgot. I was gonna say something, but I forgot. Okay, so I gotta getting. Hold up, I need to plug in my laptop. We don't want the stream, the podcast to end early. I mean, podcast. It's just me and you talk.
Yeah. No, probably there's an I don't know pilot of the podcast like shows do.
Okay, but yeah, coming back to that topic of well, just yapping in general. Fuck, I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I'm guessing that another thing we did, I guess, disagree on is the cybernetic question. Fundamentally, I do want us to build a god because fundamentally, from an oddly Christian perspective, I do believe that even when you don't say there is a god in a sense, a lot of principles go back to the fundamental starting philosophy of progressive humanity, which was Christianity, and also proto-Christianity and the Hermetic
I mean,
tradition as well. Like,
at this point, I don't see a reason for you to oppose capitalism, since capitalism has been the only system so far capable of creating an artificial intelligence that we can regard as
well, I
a
think
god.
I think
Or
communization can do the same thing.
I mean,
It
I
can do the
suppose
same.
it can, since communization works in the same way as capitalism does, or hypothetically, it can work as capitalism does by taking
I mean, that's
context from
why I
something.
still
So,
support,
but
cybernetic socialism to this day. I mean,
yeah, I
the
also
whole
support left leaning technophilic socialism stuff, but I just don't see a use of a central AI god for us. I don't see the
yeah.
use.
I guess you're not an ultra left logi enjoyer.
I mean, I see the
Referring to
use
the
of
fire
I
rises.
I see, yeah, I see the use of actively working into creating more technology and stuff, more complicated system, even if it
Yeah,
means
acceleration.
that even if it means teleplexity to happen all over again, and we end up serving or working in favor of a system just for it to just for us to not working for a simpler but more costly system. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
But what I'm trying to say is that while I'm not in favor of creating an AI god, I'm in favor of serving technology.
I would
You get
agree
me?
as well because I guess we all are kind of. Are you sympathetic to transhumanism? Because I
Yeah, of
believe
course I am.
to defeat theo complexity, man must merge with machine, or man must become a new man with the use of machines, but not be under the rule of the machine. Man
Yeah.
becomes the machine through a natural process of eugenics,
I mean, I'd rather
augmentation.
surrender. I'd rather surrender to the elements than surrendering to a living being. That's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say. I don't.
yeah,
I, w- I refuse to surrender at a central authority, but I have no problem surrendering at a decentralized authority.
yeah. Because this decentralized authority refers to technology as like a gnosis, as like a process of alchemy, technology, and cybernetics. It has the potential of creating a new kind of Promethean man. An Ubermensch. That's why I'm still sympathetic to aspects of third position beliefs, and even like paternalist beliefs in some sense, in the context
I
of
mean, even
building
a
a.
socialist can believe in that. Even a regular socialist, a second positionist can believe in that. For example, like me, I consider myself
Yeah,
as an
I know.
anarchist socialist stuff. But yeah, I really like
Because
Nietzsche.
the truest way to create communism is to make it that all the you don't need to work, or we will work for something greater, and the kind of sense my goal is to make mankind a kind of combine 40K esque, I guess. 40K as in man is autonomous. Man is able to express themselves in their own little autonomous regions. That's the leftover positive element of nationalism that is left over. You know, positive
Yeah,
element of revolutionary nationalism. But that is done for the greater good of imperium of man that expands and conquers and subjugates alien species to its will. In the context of deeperism, if communism exists in an alien planet like on Mars, in the context of Bondanow's Red Star, then mankind must also have communism in order to prevent a misinterpretation of aliens. Like what happened in the novel, right? Red Star. In the novel, what was he called again? The the guy. He went on Mars, but saw the Socialist Society on Mars, and then he did a crime. And because of that crime, the aliens, the Martians, wanted to then kill humanity. But they had initially a debate whether humanity, should actually be, assimilated peacefully. And of course, after that incident, the guy was deported back to Earth, and Mars then later invaded Earth. Well, it's implied, the War of the Worlds happened. Of course, there's another book in the Red Star series called The Engineer Many, where it explains how, uh, Mars became socialist. It became socialist through a kind of, process akin to territorial to what the land basically wanted. It became socialist through pure pragmatic technical construction and acceleration. Because Mars, unlike Earth, didn't have spiritual essence. Mars is an alien. Going back to like mythology, Mars is depicted as a separate realm. I don't remember if it was the realm of the dead in
I
in
mean,
Roman and Greek mythology.
I think that's more aligned with Resident Agastari said, since he's actually a left accelerationist.
Yep.
Nick Land,
Yep.
even at his most leftist stage inside the CCRU, he still wasn't neither a socialist or an anarchist or any of any leftist group. He just stated that capitalism was going to collapse on itself and it was inevitable. But he didn't state that the societies that would come after capitalism would be socialist, but it would be a wide range of many types of society with different production models, with different uh, structural authority. I don't know how to say it. Different cultures, it's etc. It wasn't.
Yep.
He wasn't advocating for socialism. The best way to state what he believed is that his belief was opposite to Nietzsche's. He didn't believe people would become into one tribe, but that the one tribe would collapse into a million types of tribes. Or that's what I understand from him.
I Yes, that would be correct. I mean, the one person we haven't mentioned, Caesar, he was Mark Fisher. I like Fisher.
Yeah. Yeah, I also like Fisher. I haven't read much. I'm currently reading Capitalist Realism, but I like him so far. I used to think he was just some depressed, pessimistic guy, but so far, his analysis, his
You should
analysis,
read. You should read his more
capitalism
esoteric
makes sense.
works. His esoteric works are
I've
amazing,
also read
especially.
listen. I've also read the essay "Escape from the Vampire Castle." It seems like a very Twitter Tumblr-esque center piece of work, but
Yeah,
it
because Fisher
deals
is
it
fundamentally
does
a schizoleptic.
yeah while it seems that he bases around on one specific, how do you say it, on a specific situation. I can see this happening on different contexts, and I found it an essential work of of
Acid communism is also a good work. Also, so is
yeah.
capitalist desire. Like,
Yeah, I need to read those. Also, Spectres of My Life, Ghosts of My Life. I don't remember how that book was called. Also, if
there's a
I
lot of
remember,
things we gotta read, man.
yeah, I also remember that Escape from the Vampire Castle was the last essay Mark Fisher wrote.
Yeah,
In
the audiobook actually contains like his last, seminars recorded, and it is kind of depressing because you hear like how fun of a teacher Fisher was. Like, you expect this guy to like not kill himself because it just sounds like he's like loving to speak with people. But I guess we act like that because when we go back home and look on Twitter, we see how retarded the left is and think of
yeah,
killing
if I
himself.
remember correctly, he killed himself because after publishing that essay, a lot of leftists went after him and tried to cancel him or something. And
Yeah,
because of
fuck the
that,
left, man.
since he
Fuck.
was already depressed, he killed himself. He was pressured by all those guys on Twitter. But yeah,
And
it's a left. It's the same thing we started this podcast over, that the left recently seems more concerned with anything else than class struggle. People
yep.
tend to talk about, I don't fucking know, the Amazing Digital Circus latest drama or some bullshit, and not actively caring about the working class conditions.
I mean, a good
It's what
example
we've
is
been talking about at the
Marxist
beginning of the podcast.
Leninists. A good example is Marxist Leninists giving a shit about Star Wars. Remember when Andor released and how they were saying, "Oh, it's depicting liberation. It's depicting liberation." No, it's a commodification of liberation. It's a
I mean, it's
parody.
definitely a God liberation. I mean, the
Like, it's a
key to
parody.
defeating this commodification, if you want to say it like that, is not giving a shit about it.
Exactly. Like, this is why I like decentralized communities. I like decentralized niche communities because they're not chained by commodification. In the sense, there is something very communist about them. Good, oddly, even if they originate from somewhat commodified position, like even if
Environment.
they do produce commodities, like even if these communities produce commodities, the commodity, the bourgeoisie capital can't capture them because because they're in a state where capital cannot fully capture.
This makes me think: can commodities be decommoditified?
Yes.
How so? In a in a commonizer in a commonizer sense.
Well, you just don't treat them as commodities. You treat them as something that you just want for the sake of wanting, for the sake of passion, you know?
Isn't that a commodity? Isn't that how it works?
Well, no, because the goal of commodities is to be both bought and sold and to be purely viewed as a commodity. That your happiness comes from getting the thing and not from using it.
I see. But wasn't chocolate a commodity? Isn't chocolate still a commodity since it's
Yeah,
something that is
yes.
not really
But
necessary,
the thing
people
is,
want and people
everything is a
actually consume?
commodity as so far as you think of it as a commodity. But once you know, don't think of it as a commodity, it's still a commodity, but you're not commodified by it. You're in a way decommodified. I mean, for example, is piracy. You know, piracy is an action of decommodification.
I get it now.
Or
I get it now. Yeah, I think I get it now. Commodities are only commodities if they're obtained through capital. I think I got it.
exactly, and if they're viewed within the lens of capital, you know. For example, let me compare someone who compares, let's say, someone who collects, let's say, World War II and anime figurines to someone who collects Funko Pops. That person who collects those stuff does it out of interest and passion. The other guy does it because it affirms the market that he is. You know, it affirms the advertisement that it is. It becomes a living advertisement. You know, because fundamentally, Funko Pops are shit. There's nothing good
Yeah.
about them. Like
Same thing
figurines,
happens with
meanwhile,
YouTube. I think the same of YouTubes, to be honest. I don't know
yeah,
why people don't see that's the same bullshit. I'm
it's the
going to
same.
be you might hate me for this, but I see the same thing happening with most plushes. I'm saying most because
That's
my
fine.
Miku plush is an exception since I love Miku and stuff. But yeah, most commodities suck.
Yeah, and the best thing you can do is just not treat them as commodities. You know, decommodify them by humanizing aspects of them. Of course, that doesn't literally mean like fucking toys or anything. I mean, it could, you know, it could, you know.
It still doesn't sound right to me. It feels like another way for capitalism to creep into the psyche of people, creeping into the social frameworks, into the ideals.
The other thing is capitalism capital as a thing, you know, as a beast. In most mythology, you invite the beast in, you know, most of the time. The beast isn't
Like a vampire.
always intrusive. It comes in when invited. It's the same thing with
It's like a
capital, you
vampire.
know. Yeah, capital
It's like
is
a
a
vampire.
vampire. I mean,
You have to invite it in for it to drain you. The thing
I
is
don't
that
know about.
just like a vampire,
I'm not.
just like a vampire, it's persistent, and it won't
Yes.
stop until you let him in.
Yeah, I mean, like I've heard of this guy called what's this called? A podcast called Acid Horizons, and also a guy called Esoterica.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
talked about the idea of Marxism as a Gothic horror, and I agree with that completely. Because capital, if you get rid of the boring, you know, statistics, history. I mean, the history is fun. You know, I like the history. I like the
sure.
philosophy aspects, but if you just keep the philosophy of it and the narrative, it's a horror novel. It's a Gothic horror of Frankenstein's, vampires, and ghosts. You know,
Yeah,
the proletariat is a Frankenstein being owned by vampires, and its liberation lies within its perspective. You know,
very spooky. But yeah, thanks.
yeah.
I haven't listened much to Acid Horizon, but it's thanks to them that I discovered the actual philosophy of Bataille. Uh,
True.
I'm really thankful
Another
for
good
them.
podcast I would recommend, a big inspiration for this one is Futurism Forever. Love it.
Yeah, that one.
Some of the guys from that
I'll check it
podcast are in here, by the way, in the server now.
Interesting. So it's 10 p.m. right now in both of our time zones. You're in Great Britain, right?
I have to cut that out later, but yes.
Yeah, it's late for us.
Well, we had a good discussion, even if, due to my, problems with my head, I didn't act exactly that competent.
Well then.
But it's been a good discussion. Hopefully, I pray that this captures everything. And when it captures everything, I'm going to release this as like attempting to make a podcast. I'll also release, the failed footage as like bloopers. Actually, no, that's going to be too much editing. I mean, it won't be too much editing. I'll release this and I'll say, hey, if you disagree with me with this, you're free to open. I'll promise this is why I prefer reading while talking, because if we're going to, let's say, talk about, some of the obscure shit I mentioned, because I only have it from memory. See, my memory is good. I remember the ideas, but the words to articulate, don't exactly go well, because I need to like, reread the text.
Yeah,
but it's been, but I guess it's been a great start, the Kontra-Politic, because our goal here is, to create a Kontra-Politic, to create a politic that kills politics. Because politic is a Reddit circus of capital, of class society, of the demiurgic Moloch being known as, whatever the fuck, and killing ideology by synthesizing it is the solution. And the synthesis of all ideology is communism, even when they don't admit it. So, I guess this has been Kontra-Poltik. Hopefully, I will definitely release more episodes, And